Now, it's my privilege to introduce our speakers for the next session, and we are going to be hearing from Norm Habel, who's also a South Australian, so I'm very proud that Norm's in our state. So, Norm was born near Hamilton, Victoria, and ordained in the Evangelical Lutheran Church. He served as a pastor in Brooklyn, also St. Louis at the Concordia Seminary, and then back here to Adelaide, where he taught at the College of Arts and Education. He then moved to India, was principal of an international school in South India, and then to South Australia again, where he was professor at the University of South Australia, and then Flinders University in theology. Norm's a biblical scholar who specialised in the Book of Job, ecology in the Bible, and wisdom literature. His initiatives include the Earth Bible series, the Season of Creation, and ecological hermeneutics. His recent works include Discerning Wisdom in God's Creation and the Earth Care Charter. Norm has also been involved with building positive relationships with Aboriginal peoples of Australia. He worked with the Rainbow Spirit elders in Queensland to produce Rainbow Spirit theology. And he is the author of Reconciliation, Searching for Australia's Soul. And Norm was also awarded the Member of the Order of Australia in 2003 for service to education and the development of courses in religious studies in tertiary institutions in Australia to reconciliation and social justice and to the environment. And this morning we are going to hear from Norm give a keynote presentation called Time to Publicly Acknowledge the Creation Spirituality of our Aboriginal Custodians. Welcome, Norm.
Good afternoon. It is too. Good morning, yes. Somehow, you know, when you get older, time just doesn't work the same. Now, I hope some of you may have seen the heading in the newspaper today, an advertisement, hardly normal. Now, I want to make it clear, and Rex Hunt said, "Are you normal?" And I've made it very clear I'm not. And I was at the airport recently and I said, "Your arm might cause an alarm, but we have a real alarm. Your name on the passport says, your name on the entry certificate says, Dr. Normal Habel. Are you normal?" They said, and I said, "No, I'm not." So I'm delighted to be here and represent South Australia, and I'm about to talk about acknowledgement. We've already acknowledged the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, but I'm going to move on to a whole question of how we might challenge the churches and other bodies to make acknowledgement far more important, far more profound. And I'm going to do that by taking us back. First of all, I'm going to talk about land and about faith, spirituality, and about treaty. But I'm going to take us back in that process to a story from the Bible, the story of Abraham, a story that we've basically ignored because we have followed Moses and Joshua and the Promised Land and all those others and ignored one of the most profound and important prototypes for acknowledgement. That's what I'm about to talk about. We're talking about Terra Australis, Australia, land. First, land. And you have a handout, and the front page of your handout is about basic acknowledgement, and the back page will be for the debates in our workshops tomorrow. First of all, land. The land was the land and is the land of the Aboriginal peoples. The land is filled with dreaming, the land is filled with spiritual forces, and we need to still recognise their presence. Those who came as settlers came generally with the understanding this was terra nullius, a land with no legal control, no legal management. And one of the quotes that I found is, the settlers saw us as nothing more than fauna and flora like dingoes and emus. So the attitude of some of our ancestors, our settlers, was absolutely abhorrent. Now, my background happens to be Lutheran and German, and my ancestors first came to the Barossa Valley. And recently, some years ago, the Barossa Valley put up this monument that you see. A monument to honour the fact, quote, and the quote on that monument says, "The Lord has given us this land." That's a quote from Joshua. Joshua saying, we have the divine right to take away the people from this land. The irony of it is that the text that was there was Joshua 2 verse 9. If anybody knows what Joshua 2 verse 9 is, who said that? Anyone? Rahab the Canaanite. So they misquoted the text. It's a promised land. No. The land of promise. I want to go back to Abraham. Abraham came to the land of Canaan, and his role was to mediate blessing to the people of the land. And he passed through the land, and the land was a host country. And the land became, all the people became friends, and he became one of the Lecals. Abraham. There was no conflict between Abraham and the people of the land. They were allies. Yes. Abraham was essentially, became a Canaanite, became one of the people of the land. If we go back to Genesis 14, that text is an ancient text that's been ignored. Genesis 14, perhaps the oldest text in the book of Genesis. And in that text, Abraham is said to be allies of various people, and in that text, some enemies come from the east to get bitumen from near Sodom. And the enemies come and they capture Sodom and the people of Sodom and Lot, and they take it away. But Abraham, being an ally to these people, says, I'll go and fix that. So Abraham takes an army of 318 men and attacks the eastern kings overnight and captures the people of Sodom and takes the king of Sodom home. He acknowledged the land. It's time we did the same. So the first of the acknowledgements on your sheet reads acknowledgement in relation to land. Let me read it. We, the settlers, acknowledge in relation to land that we have often discounted the capacity of Aboriginal peoples to be custodians of the host country, unlike Abraham, who recognized Canaan as the host country and settled in Canaan, becoming an ally with members of the community, and that the Aboriginal peoples have long been custodians of the land and have a right to claim that the Aboriginal peoples have the capacity to read the landscape and the laws of the land. Aboriginal people have the right to exercise their sovereignty, which still exists. 2, faith. Faith was not recognized by the people who first came, not even by the missionaries. They didn't recognize Aboriginal spirituality. And there's one quote in One Blood which has always haunted me. Quote, "It was not simply that the Hittites, Jebusites, and Aboriginal Canaanites had been left to the natural consequences of the effect of not having the natural knowledge of God, but of the people in that condition, the Aborigines were judged to be on the lowest scale of degraded humanity." Unbelievable what we once said. But the absolute opposite is true. We're talking about Aboriginal Canaanites now and Canaanite Aborigines, which is what they call the people. And I would argue that the faith of the Aborigines, or the indigenous people of Canaan, and the faith of the Aboriginal people in Australia is a creation spirituality. Very similar. And if my understanding of Aboriginal spirituality was especially gained through working with the Rainbow Spirit elders. And the Rainbow Spirit elders are in this book, Rainbow Spirit Theology. This is the understanding that I have as a basic starting point. The Creator Spirit, they said, is known in Aboriginal Australians by many names, including Yirambal, Biame, Rainbow Spirit, Payamol, Birbal, Wangina, and in Christian times, Father God. But what we discover when we go to Abraham is another dimension, extraordinary dimension. Rainbow Spirit Theology, there it is again. All those elements, especially the idea that the Rainbow Spirit, Creator Spirit, formed the land and formed the spirits of the land and the life forces of the land, and humans have a responsibility to that spirit. Now we go back to Abraham, back to Genesis 14, that ancient story. What happened? When Abraham came back from that battle with his people and with Lot and all the things he brought back, he came back and he had bread and wine, it says, at a Eucharist with Sodom, the king of Sodom, who was a good guy, by the way, and Melchizedek, the king of Salem. Now, Melchizedek also happened to be the priest of Salem, and he blesses Abraham. This is his blessing. "Blessed be Abraham by El Elyon, maker of sky and land." The problem is that in most of your translations, the word El is translated as God. So the name of the Canaanite God is lost because of our translations. Abraham is blessed by El, the Creator Spirit of Canaan. And then what happens? Who is this El Elyon? Who is this Creator Spirit? Well, I've studied this this God, for many years. Who is El? Who is El? Not Yahweh, not the God of Israel, because Yahweh was only revealed to whom? Moses. Not to Abraham. So when you go back, you realize that Abraham was one of the Canaanites and recognized the God of the Canaanites, who was associated with earth, not some celestial world. He's also a God of compassion. And then what does Abraham do? He gives a tithe of all that he's got to El, the Creator God of Canaan. And when the king of Sodom says to him, "Look, take everything you've gotten from this battle, all the stuff that was in Sodom, And Abraham says, no, I'm not going to take a sandal of anything that belongs to you. And he swears by El. So Abraham is not only recognized and blessed by El and gives a tithe to El, but swears by this God. El Elyon. So now I believe we can tell you, I can relate to you, and for the moment I'm going to be Abraham. I am Abraham. Since I came to Canaan, I've come to know El, the creative spirit of Canaan, variously known as El Elyon, El Shaddai, and El Olam. I was blessed by El Elyon, promised a future by El Shaddai, swore by El Elyon, and witnessed a treaty with El Olam. This is the biblical record of my creation spirituality. So acknowledgement 2 on your sheet. We now acknowledge, in relationship to faith, that we have often dismissed our Aboriginal beliefs in the creator spirit as paganism, unlike Abraham, who recognized El, the creator spirit of the indigenous peoples of Canaan. That the Aboriginal peoples have a dynamic faith in a creator spirit who has transformed the landscape and is present in country. That Aboriginal faith and practice, reflecting a rich spiritual awareness, has made a powerful contribution and continues to and should make a greater contribution to the multi-faith culture of our country. That the Aboriginal custodians, for them the land is alive, replete with all the spiritual forces of life. 3, treaty. Early in the history of South Australia, there was a potential of a treaty. Never in New South Wales, but there was in South Australia. Under the first 2 governors, Hindmarsh and Gawler, there was an awareness that, well, we might need to follow, we could follow the letters patent of King William IV, right? And that patent, that document, back in 1830s, said that the rights of the Aboriginal natives, quote, is to be recognised, and their occupation is to be recognised. And there were people in the land who said we should recognise their land. Reverend Carville, a right-wing Lutheran bloke, even said that, you know, way back when. Adelaide was also called the city of churches, not because of the buildings, but because they accepted anybody from any faith, even the Aboriginal peoples. And they built a school in those first years at Pultawadley, a school for Aboriginal children, and they what? Taught them in Aboriginal language, in Kaurna. And that Kaurna grammar and dictionary is still available. Now, why? Then came Governor Gray, who was a racist son of a, you know, and he took the children away, closed the school, closed it, and forgot the letters patent. Now, if we go back to Abraham, then we begin the 3rd point. Abraham had a friend, made friends with a Canaanite leader called Abimelech. And this is a quote directly from the discussion relationship between Abraham and Abimelech. God is with you, he says, in all that you do. Now, therefore, swear to me by God that you will not deal falsely with me or my offspring or my posterity, but as I have dealt loyally with you, you will deal with me and with the land. Notice that. Extraordinary. And the word for deal loyally is chesed, which means covenant loyalty. And he's saying that's what ought to be between the people of Abraham and the people of the land. And the treaty includes also the land. Isn't that extraordinary? Moses and Joshua totally ignore the treaty, the agreement. Totally. There's another treaty with the same guy. And the two men made a treaty, and they swore a treaty that they would be friends, work together, and they made that treaty and at a place called Beersheba, the well of the oath. And Abraham swears an oath again by the Canaanite god, El Olam. Now, if we go to the Uluru Statement, and I'm not going to do so much with that because I'm sure that Anne will follow through on that. But it's important to recognise that just as there was a need for a treaty with Abraham, there's also a need for a treaty and a recognition of the sovereignty of the Aboriginal peoples. That sovereignty is significant because sovereignty incorporates spiritual bond that's been there and remains there. It's nothing to do with national political stuff. It has to do with the eternal bond that you have with the land. And we need to recognise that. Sovereignty of the nation. Acknowledgement 3. We, the settlers, in relation to treaty, acknowledge that we have often ignored the capacity of Aboriginal people to function as citizens of the host country and negotiate a treaty with the settlers. Unlike Abraham, who made a treaty with an indigenous community in Canaan, declaring loyalty, making a bond with the land itself, and swearing by the Canaanite creator spirit. And that in the light of this acknowledgement and the Uluru Statement, we endorse the treaty process. Now, I believe this means a challenge to the churches. While a few things are being done, the Uniting Church has just put out a document at his last recognising spirituality, but it doesn't go nearly far enough. Also, I recognise that the Catholic Nazi has developed a plaque, and it says, "We acknowledge the traditional custodians who have walked upon the land, and we acknowledge their deep spiritual attachment." But it doesn't go far enough either. It doesn't do that final step of saying treaty. We have to have a treaty with you. That means that you're our equals, not before. And so tomorrow afternoon, when we deal with the question of a common dreams statement, we need to consider precisely that, the concept of treaty, the need of a treaty. And what the government is talking about in terms of a referendum is totally inadequate. We need the churches to stand up and follow the precedent of Abraham, follow the way, declare the acknowledgement, declare the land, it's their land and they have a sovereign right. Declare the land is indeed filled with the spirit of creator spirit, and their creator spirituality is important. Now, way back when, the Rainbow Spirit elders, over 20 years ago, made this statement: Abraham, the peacemaker, respected the peoples of the land. We ask the same. Abraham recognized the God of the land. We ask the same. Abraham and the peoples of the land shared mutual blessings. We ask the same. And so in the acknowledgement of common dreams, I would ask that during the workshops, you think about how we might word, a common dreams acknowledgement that is strong, that challenges the forces, challenges the political leaders, goes way beyond the current thinking associated with a referendum. The churches take a stand, that we recognise unequivocally the sovereignty of the people of this land. We recognise unequivocally their spirituality, their creation spirituality, as profound and relevant for us here today. And we recognise that a treaty is essential. Thank you.
Thank you, Norm. We are having a response to Norm's presentation now from Anne Pattel-Gray, and I'd like to introduce Anne to you. Anne is an Aboriginal woman who is a descendant of the Bidjara Kari people in Queensland and a recognised Aboriginal leader within Australia, nationally and also internationally. Anne has dedicated her life to the struggle of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people and is a strong campaigner and lobbyist, deeply committed to seeking justice, equity and equal representation for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. Anne works to build a deeper sense of community and participation that brings a greater Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander heritage and cultural identity and cohesion with the broader community that can lead to beneficial partnerships, engagement and reconciliation. Anne has a PhD from the University of Sydney in the studies of religion with the major focus on Aboriginal religion and spirituality, and was the first Aboriginal person to graduate with a PhD from the University of Sydney. Anne's a scholar, theologian, activist and a prolific writer with several publications. And on top of that, she's managed 30 years in senior management as a CEO and has a lot of expertise to offer us. So Anne, I welcome you with your response to Norm's presentation.
Good morning. First, I'd like to just take some time to acknowledge the work of Norm Habel that he has done over the decades with my people throughout. Through his support, he has given voice to our spiritual and theological understanding of the Creator. You are one of so few non-Indigenous biblical scholars that have focused on Aboriginal people, our land, and a discourse within an Australian context. We appreciate that greatly, and I significantly want to acknowledge that contribution while I have this opportunity to do so. When I look at the work that Norman has done, particularly around the reinterpretation or a new interpretation of Abraham Trails. And as we all know, the Bible has been interpreted in so many different ways to justify all manner of horrors that has taken place in this country. And I've often been asked by white people, how can I be both Aboriginal and Christian? And that tells me a lot about who they are, that they've got to ask me that question. Because for me, both can coexist, and they do so quite well and rightfully. It's through my Christian faith and my theological understanding that I'm able to challenge the church from the basis of my culture, and to be able to enable church to understand my culture and my connection to this land. Norman does wonderful justice in helping non-Indigenous people begin to understand what land means to us. It is more than just property. The land is, everything for me. It's the basis of my identity and my connection to country. When I look at, the things that have happened over the centuries to my people and how the Bible was used in a manner to justify our oppression, the theft of land, the genocide, the cultural genocide. And I look at the church and I say, why have you not looked into this? Why have you not acknowledged your role in our cultural genocide? Why have you not acknowledged your role in the theft and dispossession of my people? Why? I've not had anyone answer me yet. Why? Is it because you fear being ostracised? Is it because you fear that, you'll be judged? I don't know. But God has given you the conviction and the tools in which to do so. So I don't understand why you haven't done it and why you haven't held your churches accountable. Today, government leads our agenda. Government leads the church. Puts a ring through its nose and drags it along. And we're happily running behind government who's setting the damn agenda on moral ethics in this country. Why are we doing that? We know these people lack integrity. We talk about it. Yet we want to follow them. Why would we want to do that? My time here is going to be my cry, and it'll probably be my last opportunity to reach out to fellow Christians, to the church, to seek your support behind our struggle. And as Norman says, it cannot be anything but a treaty. It's time Australia recognised our sovereignty. It is God-given, not man-made, God-given. The Creator was here with us long before white man ever came to this country. It is your bigotry, your racism, your ethnocentrism that did not recognise that reality. And there are many in Australia who still hold that as being the truth. Yet I look around and I see so many people here that can speak truth and correct that misinterpretation or understanding or ideology or whatever you want to call it that people believe or hold as truth. For me, when I look at the Old Testament stories, that's the stories of the Creator's interaction with the Israelite people. It's not my story. My story for my people is in my dreaming, because that tells me of how God, the Creator, interacted with my ancestors in forging this country that I love, in giving me the laws and the connection to my land, the songs that I need to sing to rejuvenate it, to how to care for it and love it, but to see it as a part of me physically and not something that I can buy or sell. For most First Nation peoples, the thought of selling and buying land is just unthinkable. It's like, why would you do that? Yet I understand it is a Western concept, and it's not one that I can particularly understand, but it's one in which I accept that that is a part of your culture. And I have no problem with that. But what I have a problem with is when you want to deny me my land in the process of your greed to want to rob and rip everything out of the earth. When I drive around this country, and particularly when I look at the climate change that has taken place within this country, and we all know the extreme heat that has been happening over the last few years in our summers, and then we have that extreme cold, short snaps in the winter. It's not the country, it's not the land that I grew up on. The weather has changed dramatically. The floods, the fires, everything that has taken place. And I just can't help but weep for the earth when I see what the pastoralists and the farmers have done and continue to do, because they don't understand there's different ways of doing things. They don't have to knock everything down in order to grow grass. No? They don't have to eliminate the entire environment in order to profit from the environment. When we look at, new subdivisions, what do? They come in and they knock down every tree. And you think, God, you'd think today with this technology and expertise we could be smarter about how we build our world. But it seems that we're just too dumb and too stupid to recognise the damage we are continuing to do. We've even got people that are saying that, we don't have an environmental crisis. The earth is fine, But listen to the voice of the young people. They'll tell you different. And they tell you with such aggression because they're sick of being ignored by the older generations. Someone said, asked a question on the first day about how do we get the young people in here? Why aren't the young people involved in this conversation? Well, maybe because you don't listen. They don't want to come in here and be ignored. They want to be heard. So maybe we've got to zip it and open our ears and give them an opportunity to talk to us, and we can learn from them. Then maybe they might be here sitting down with us. I find that this book that Norman's written, I'll just get it, is a beautiful book for churches, for Christians, for groups, for anybody to begin to study, to use as a study booklet, to begin to understand, what took place with Abraham, the recognition of God being with the First Nations peoples long before white people came along. I often go to some Aboriginal churches or around the country, and I'm quite miffed when I walk in and I see this white Jesus, blue-eyed, blonde hair, hanging on the cross. And I think, my goodness, are you still holding to that? How much theology or biblical teachings do you understand that you still got this white Jesus? Where's your black one? You know what I mean? We talk about theology that came here in a boat, in a flower pot, brought by the West. Well, you still got it in a flower pot, I'm telling you now. Over 200 years, you still got it in a flower pot and you're trying to water the damn thing to grow and it's dying on you because it's root bound. You got to bust the pot, put it in the earth and let it grow naturally in the land here. It's when theology begins to come from within this context we live in, will it mean something? Will it be inclusive? Will it give something to somebody? While we continue to do theology that's to the north, to them old dead church leaders, biblical scholars, theologians, call them what you want, but they're all dead, you know, and they talked about an era that was long ago. Maybe we need to start looking at what's alive here today and the voices that are being heard. The thing I like about this forum, the Progressive Forum, is that it's a safe place for people to share radical thoughts, liberalism, and to look at how we go forward in changing the world that we're confined to. It's a safe place to do that. There's not many safe places for me in which I can go and talk radically about the things that are needed or need to be heard. Quite often I'm not heard at all. More like being marginalised because it's not the rhetoric that people want to hear today. I look forward to continuing our discussions here. I look forward to an opportunity to share with you further and to talk more deeply about the struggles of Aboriginal Australia, because we are in a horrible place. And some people misinterpret my assertiveness as anger. And I've lived with that all my life. You know, she's one angry Murray, you know. I hear that all the time. But why is it that it's okay for you white people to be assertive? And that's not interpreted as being anger. But the moment I'm assertive, oh, she has to be angry, you know? I find that very curious, but anyhow, it's a label that I've worn. As I said, I get many labels. But Norman, your work here around a treaty and the discussion and the dialogue from the Uluru Statement. I've been in the struggle since the 70s, and we've been asking for a treaty since the 70s. We don't need a referendum to talk about it anymore. I think we've exhausted the damn topic. What we need is action. And we need you people who elect that bloody government to get up and hold them accountable and say it's time to act. No more dialogue. No more conversation. We need to implement a treaty. Because if you don't, your Aboriginal people are going to be extinguished within the next decade. You talk about the crises of the land. Well, I'm telling you, there's a crisis of the people. And if you don't get up and start acting and holding this government accountable, holding your churches accountable, their silence is deafening. And I don't know why. I don't know why. And I don't know why we're being led around like cows by this government. We've been given the mandate, the biblical mandate. You know, Christ has given us the mandate to get up and fight for justice. We all know what's happening, so why aren't we doing it? I hope by the end of this conference we will. I am pleading for my people, for you to hear my voice, for you to hear our cries. When I speak tomorrow night, you're going to hear why. I'm heartbroken because I'm going to tell you the truth of what's happening in our world that nobody seems to care about. And my God, in 1988, 20,000 white people came and marched with us and told us they cared enough to come and stand with us. And I'm asking you again, show us you care. Show us that you care enough to stand and elevate our voice and to call this government to account and say, we must act. There is no more conversation, because I've just seen too many of our people die fighting for a treaty. And I don't know what the legacy's going to be, but it's not looking good. So please, find it in your heart, find it in your spirit, to fight for not only us, but to fight for the land, this country, this Mother Earth who's crying out to you too, in every which way she can, to stop the destruction of her and us that go with them. Because we care for her. We fight for her. We do everything for her. We sing songs to her. We tell stories about her. We listen to her. She provides for us. Can you listen to us? Because we'll tell you what she's saying. We'll tell you what is needed for us to have a future. Because our children deserve a future, so do yours. And I would like to think that that future would see us equal, not subjugated, but equal, walking arm in arm together, and where we both have a love for Mother Earth that we share equally and openly, where you can come and celebrate with us in our ceremonies, in our stories, in our songs, where everything that we have is something that you would want to respect, but not only that, be proud to be able to call yourself a real Australian. Thank you.
We hear your sorrow, Anne, and I think we want to do something. So we've got a few minutes now, and I'm just wondering what we might like to do with those minutes. I'm wondering if we have some questions we want to put to Anne, who has challenged us so remarkably. How can we not really hear and do something? And Norm, who is offering a way to our more traditional churches that have stayed silent and haven't gone far enough. And for the bigger issue of our planet and universe. So can I just see if people have some burning questions or things they would like to put to either Norm or Anne, and we'll see if we can get a microphone. We do have 3 people, and we have a microphone, yes. So these questions might be to either Norm or Anne, if you don't mind being up here, or we can give you a microphone there if need be. Okay, can somebody take the microphone to one of our questioners? Yes, you got it. Okay, go on.
John Corriple, I'm just wondering what we can do to get the churches to put in place actions they've already said they'd put in place. I know from my tradition, Uniting Church at one stage, and someone who knows the history better than me will know that the Uniting Church at some stage made some idea of giving properties, a certain percentage of properties over to Aboriginal people. I haven't heard anything of that since I think a property in South Sydney went, and that was about when I was a young fella. That's a few years ago. So if someone could follow that up, that would be great.
We'll hear from someone else there.
I have a question. I hear, I love the fact that treaty is finally being addressed. I worked with an Indigenous warrior named Ray Jackson, who was a Wiradjuri activist who put the Aboriginal death in custody issue on the map. And one of the things that he fought for was sovereignty, treaty, and social justice. So I was wondering if a treaty will also include addressing the Aboriginal death in custody issue, because a lot of Aboriginal people, particularly in Redfern, they're still fighting for justice for their loved ones that have been murdered by police, and it would be great if that was included too.
Yes, it does. Having a treaty, it basically gives recognition of 2 power systems equally sharing, and therefore the whole justice system would have to be overhauled as a result of some recognised form of treaty. What would happen in Australia, and if Australians really pushed the whole process of a treaty, the act, don't talk about it, let's act, things would have to change, because the treaty would bring change. It would be the recognition of equality in this country, of Aboriginal people taking their rightful place alongside your government. It would be a dialogue about how things would be administered. It would be a dialogue about shared economics and decision making. So death in custody is certainly something that would be radically addressed. It is something that we've campaigned against from the 80s, early 80s, and we continue. And sadly, it includes our children now who are also dying in custody in juvenile detention. So, no, it's very much a part of the whole dialogue that would take place. Thank you.
Being a big biblical buff, I have to go back. Not only do we have 2 parties that need to be treated equally and have an opportunity to recognise the sovereignty of the land, but if you go back to the biblical covenants, the biblical treaties, the land too is often included. Wouldn't it be something if we recognised country as part of the treaty?
Yes. Now, if you'd like to stand when you have your question, thank you.
Hello, Anne. I'm a Queenslander. I'd like to hear your perspective on 2 very current things happening in Queensland. Last week, state government announced that after 10 years, a class action, major class action, $190 million is being made available for stolen wages. We know that the backstory of that is horrible. There's so many old people who were subject to that, and they've died already. Yeah. That's one bit. The other bit is an announcement which will be made coming Sunday in Brisbane by the relevant ministers and the Premier on the current state of a treaty that's being developed in Queensland. The Uniting Church has played a very significant role in both of those things, and some other churches too, but not many. I'd like you to tell us, what do you see in this? Where do you place all this stuff in the big story of things still unresolved?
Yes, I know of these dialogues that are taking place at the moment in Queensland. But sadly, there's still dialogues. God only knows how long it's going to take for anything formalised to come out of Queensland or any other state. There is dialogues happening around the formation of a treaty, but I just don't know the contents of that. Who are the Aboriginal people that are a part of that process? I don't know. Who...
doing the trip, biting the dust, and what we're going to hear is I don't know the detail of what we're going to hear on Sunday, but they're saying that this is their latest announcement on their intention, not just if or maybe, that there will be a treaty in Queensland. Yeah, you can say that, but as I said, is it in my lifetime? That's the question. As to the elders, I don't know who the elders are, and that once again I would have to know, because I don't know who's representing me. Great. In regards to that. Now, in regards to the Uniting Church, I mean, the Uniting Church in Queensland, it's done some, even though it comes from a backward state of horrific racism, Queensland itself, the Uniting Church, has done some major stuff, and I've got to acknowledge that. Congress grew out of that, It began in Queensland through the Aboriginal ministry, and fortunately I was a part of that as well. So, there's a strong legacy that comes with the Uniting Church. I just think what I'm concerned about is that at a national level, it's not saying enough, and it's not elevating the voices that can speak on this with authority to a level that is competent and challenging. And this is where I challenge my church as well, because we need to be doing more. While we're looking at also the treaty process in Aboriginal, I'm in the process also of trying to meet with the moderator and others, because I have concerns about the Uniting Care and its leadership and what it's delivering, because its systemic racism is horrific at this point in time within Queensland, what it's doing to its Aboriginal staff, how it's treating clients. It certainly isn't upholding the ethos or the policies or values of the Uniting Church, and that concerns me greatly. So these are some of the things that I'll be also looking at within Queensland. But once again, maybe we can help Queensland along if there's a stronger voice coming at a national level as well.
Do we have a woman who wants to ask a question? Because we've got one more question, I think. Is it? It's already okay.
My name is Linda. Thank you for your talks today. I think we can see through the will of the audience that people are really passionate about this support. One of the things that people don't know how to do is how do we act? Where do we place the strength of our actions? And as Matthew Fox said last night, that place where people don't see the sacred in the world, do they value it? So my question is really a call to everyone to say, how do we find our voice? How do we find our place to act? There's an organisation called Concerned Australians who did a great job on pulling people together nationally to act against the intervention. But right now in my neighbourhood, which is East Arnhem Land, I see a really targeted genocide by Christian organisations. I don't know what to do about that. I don't know how to combat that when at church services or church organisations are telling people that they can't actually be Aboriginal and esteem their ancestors and be Christians too. So it's a really big issue and it's nothing short of targeted genocide. So I just wanted to share.
That's not new, that's been going on for decades. However, what you can do is your church or yourself or your people can stand up and challenge these churches about what they're doing, about their intent racism, and to be able to lift up the Aboriginal voice that can speak against such, hatred of, our culture and our Aboriginality, because it's hatred. When you want to demonise someone's culture and faith and spirituality and find no wealth or anything worth within it, then you need to go away, and it takes people like you and me who will challenge churches and Christians like that. That's been going on for a long time across this country, and I would hope that Aboriginal theologians and church leaders like myself would take the arms up and challenge these people as well. I tell you now, a lot of my people, even though they've been told that, our culture is demonic and you cannot be Christian and Aboriginal at the same time, you have to be one or the other. I tell you now, deep down, our people might give you the lip service or give them the lip service that they want to hear, but they'll never give away their identity. That'll just go underground, as it's done for so many years. So, where you have an opportunity, speak out against it, and maybe educate, take the time to educate these people that God was with us a long time before they came.
Can we please thank Norm and Anne for their challenge today?